Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad, he destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light. He's not a spirit. He has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled master, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in our book, The Straight Path, As-Siratul Mustaqim, which was written by the very great scholar, Shaykh Abdullah Al-Harari. May Allah have mercy on him. We've made it to page 255 in the book. We've made it to page 255, 255. At the bottom of the page where it says Al-Ba'th, the resurrection. We're on page 255 where it says the resurrection. So we've made it into the part of the book where we are discussing what it is that Muslims believe regarding the sam'iyat, the things that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us about. Okay, things that we would not have any knowledge of, things that we wouldn't have any knowledge of if the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam had not told us about it. And this includes many of the things that will happen in the future. The first one here that's mentioned for today is Al-Ba'th, the resurrection. Let's read what it says in the book. It says, the resurrection is true. Boom. 3 words. Perfect sentence. Okay, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, starts the chapter by just stating the simple fact that the resurrection is true. As Muslims, as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we believe that this is real. The resurrection is real. And among the proofs of it, and there are many proofs of it, but among the proofs of it is the ayah in the Quran, ثُمَّ إِنَّكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ تُبْعَثُونَ, which means then, truly, on the day of judgment, you will be resurrected. Okay, so Allah Ta'ala very explicitly said that the resurrection will occur. But what is the resurrection exactly? Let's keep reading. It says, it is the exiting of the dead from the graves after the reconstruction of the body that had been eaten by the soil, if they were among the bodies eaten by the soil. So what the author, may Allah have mercy on him, is saying here is that when the human being dies, that person is buried normally. That person is buried. And normally, after a person is buried, what happens? The body decays. The flesh and blood are consumed by the soil and the worms and everything else until it's just a skeleton. And after more time passes, even the skeleton will turn to dust. Even a skeleton will turn to dust. Okay? So the human being disappears, except for one very small piece called Azmul Dhanab, which is the one piece of the human being, a very small piece that does not ever go away. And so on the day of judgment, what will happen is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create again the bodies of every person who ever lived in the dunya, every person who ever died in the dunya. These people, their bodies are going to be recreated and their souls are going to be put back into their body. Okay, so the body that had decayed and turned to dust is going to turn back into a flesh and bone body by the will of Allah. The soul of the person will be put back into that body, and then the person is going to come out of the grave. Okay, he's going to come out of the grave onto the earth where he will be able to walk around. This is called the resurrection. Okay, the Muslims, we believe that on the day of judgment, the humans will be resurrected body and soul. The body will be recreated and the soul will be put back into it. Okay, we do not believe like Christians believe, okay, or like some Christians believe, which is that after you die, it's only the soul that gets judged. It's the soul that goes to paradise, the soul that goes to hellfire. This is what many Christians believe, but this is not what Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah teaches. No. What we teach is that at the beginning of the day of judgment, Allah resurrects the bodies of the dead. So the body, the flesh and blood body is returned to them, and the soul is returned to the body, and the person then is conscious and he walks around. He can see and hear and move. And when the person goes eventually to the paradise or to the hellfire, they go there body and soul. Okay, it's not only the soul which experiences the delight of paradise, and it's not only the soul which experiences the torture of hell, but rather the delight and tortures of the hereafter are physical. Okay, they're experienced by the body as well. Okay, that's why the author, may Allah have mercy on him, he said, it is the exiting of the dead from the graves. Okay, so the people who died, their bodies are brought back and they exit out of the grave. It says what? After the reconstruction of the body that had been eaten by soil. So even though the body, when you die in this life, even though your body might decay, might turn to dust, okay, that doesn't matter. On the day of judgment, Allah is going to bring your body back, even if it was eaten by the soil. And then he said, if they were among the bodies eaten by the soil, because not everybody's body is going to decay. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us that the prophets are alive in their graves making salat. So we know therefore that the bodies of the prophets do not decay. The bodies of prophets do not decay. Their bodies are not eaten by the soil. So when they are resurrected on the day of judgment, the body will not need to be recreated because the first body did not decay. It did not go away. This is also true of the battlefield martyrs. The martyrs who die on the battlefield, who are fighting sincerely for the sake of Allah, these people, their bodies do not decay. And in some cases, if a person is a very pious Muslim, their body will not decay either. Okay, so it's confirmed that there are some people whose bodies are not going to decay, but it doesn't matter. If your body decayed or did not decay, you're going to come out of the grave on the day of judgment, either because your body is still there or because your body decayed and was reconstructed. Either way, the people are going to come out of their graves and they're going to be conscious. He continues, may Allah have mercy on him. Those are the bodies of other than the prophets, the martyrs of the battlefield, and some of the walis. Okay, so he's just mentioning that not all bodies are eaten by the soil, because the bodies of the prophets and the battlefield martyrs and some of the walis are not eaten by the soil. He says, because of what was narrated by Tawatur of witnessing some of the walis. What he means by that is that it is known by that this is true. If you recall, we talked about Tawatur, when there's a huge number of witnesses and they told a huge number of people and they collectively told a huge number of people and they collectively told a huge number of people, and that every step in the transmission, the number of people involved was such a large number that there's no possibility of them lying. There's no possibility of them agreeing to a lie either by accident or by conspiracy. And in some cases, we have events that were conveyed by tawatur of pious people dying and their bodies not being decayed. For example, how many of you know that over in the Middle East, graves get reused? You know, some of the graveyards over there are very old. They've been there more than 1,000 years. So what do? When they bury a person in the grave, they bury him in the grave. And then, they use up more graves. They bury more and more and more people. But eventually you get to a point where there's no more room in the graveyard. All the graves are used. So what do? They go back to the first graves, because by that time, maybe it's been a couple hundred years since the first person was buried. And they reuse the grave, because by then, the first person usually, there's nothing left of him. Okay? And a similar thing happened in Damascus. This was during our lifetimes when this happened, or very close to our lifetimes. A grave was to be reused, and the grave diggers dug up the grave so that they could put a new body in it. The last person who was buried in that grave was buried there many centuries ago. So it was assumed that the body would be gone, that the body would have turned to dust. But when they dug up that grave, they found that the body was in the grave like perfect. The person looked like it was a living person who was asleep. It didn't look like, no decay, no harm had come to the body at all. And the grave diggers looked at one another, asking, what should we do? They said, well, cover him back up. We'll dig up a different grave. This was one of the events that was mentioned to me. MashaAllah. And there are some events that are mutawatir, similar to that one. In case you're wondering, the grave in question that we're talking about, that the grave diggers dug up and found the body in it unchanged, it was the grave of a huge Shafi'i scholar known as Ibn Salah. He's more famous for the work he did in hadith science. But Ibn Salah, it was his grave, MashaAllah. He was in there for many centuries, and he did not decay. And there are other cases like that, some of which were conveyed by tawatur. So we know that it's not only the prophets and the battlefield martyrs whose bodies don't decay. If a person is a very pious wali, that person also might be given the blessing that his body will not decay. Let's keep reading. It says, the first for whom the grave would split open is our master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the very first person who's going to come out of his grave on the day of judgment is whom? It's Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's the first one who's going to come out of his grave on Yawm al-Qiyamah. It says also the people of Mecca, Medina, and At-Ta'if are among the first who will be resurrected. So the people who lived in those places, Mecca, Medina, and At-Ta'if, are going to be among the first ones to be resurrected. We're not saying they're going to be the absolute first ones. No, the absolute first one is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And, I couldn't tell you who's number 2, number 3, number 4, like in some kind of order. But the people of Mecca, Medina, and Ta'if are among the early ones to come out of their graves. Any questions about resurrection before we move to the next chapter? These chapters here are quite short, so I can stop and take questions after each one, inshallah. By the way, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah to those who salamed me. Don't see any questions at the moment, so we'll keep going. The next chapter, Al-Hashr. It means the herding, or sometimes they translate it as the assembly. Okay, what is the herding? It says, the herding is true. Boom. Another short sentence, statement of fact. The herding is true. So as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we believe that among the things that will happen on the Day of Judgment is that the people who come out of their graves after the resurrection, that they're going to be herded together. They're going to be assembled together in one place. Let's read about what the assembly is. It says, it is for the people to be gathered after resurrection and driven to a place. So after the people come out of the grave, they're going to all be driven and herded to a place. They're going to be angels guiding the people so that all of the people will come together in one place. It's not going to be possible for anyone to escape this herding. No one's going to be able to run away and sneak away from the angels and then not be judged. No, every single person, without exception, is going to be pushed by the angels towards a certain place where everybody's going to be gathered together. It says, and that would be on the transformed earth. Okay, the place where the assembly will take place, the place where we're going to be herded together, is a place known as the changed earth. Al-Ard al-Mubaddala. Okay, the changed earth. Okay, and it's mentioned in the hadith that the changed earth is the land of Greater Syria, the land of Sham. Okay, when we say a Sham, in Arabic, we're referring to the area which is today occupied by the countries of Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, the occupied territories, and even portions of what's today Turkey. That whole area is called a Sham. It's called a Sham, and a Sham is the place where the herding is going to take place. All of the people are going to be gathered together to the land of Asham, but it's going to be changed. It's not going to be exactly the way it is right now. It's going to be the changed earth. It's going to be changed into a different form. What does it say next in the book? It says it is a leveled earth. So one of the changes that will happen to it is that the land will be made level, perfectly flat. It says completely flat, like stretched leather, with neither mountains nor valleys in it. So the changed earth is going to be absolutely flat. There's going to be no hills. There's going to be no dips. It's going to be a perfectly flat land. It says it is bigger and wider than this earth of ours. So the earth that we know of right now, you know, with the continents and everything, the changed earth is going to be stretched to be larger even than the earth that we know of today. And on that land, everybody is going to be gathered together. It says, and it is white like silver. So the land is going to be white. We don't mean white like a sheet of paper. Okay, it says white like silver. Okay, white like silver. Does that mean it's going to have like a stainless steel kind of appearance? Allah only knows. Okay, I never interpreted it as meaning that it looks exactly like silver. But Allahu Alam what it is. It could be like white sand, or it could be, you know, I don't know. But it's flat. Flat land. No hills, no dips. Okay? And the color of it is white. Keeping in mind that silver used to be called white in the past. That color used to fall under the umbrella of white. And the gathering, it says the gathering will be of three cases. So as the people are gathered, are herded together, people are going to fall into three categories. What's the first category? Number one, it says a division are fed, clothed, and riding on female camels with golden saddles, and they are the pious. So there's going to be a group of people who, when they come out of their graves, they're going to be given camels to ride on to go to the place of the assembly. These people are going to have, you know, tall animals to ride upon. So they're going to be up above everybody else. Okay? They're not going to have to make a long, difficult walk because they're going to be riding. They're going to be wearing clothes so no one will see their nakedness. Okay? And they're going to be fed so they won't even be hungry. Okay? For them, the path, the journey from wherever they came out of the grave at to the place of the assembly will be an easy one. Who are the ones that have this kind of journey to the assembly? It's the pious, the people of taqwa, the Muslims who fulfill their obligations and don't do anything haram, or they repented from whatever haram they did prior to death. These people are the ones who will have an easy journey to the assembly. What's category number two? It says a division are barefoot and naked, and they are the Muslims among the major sinners. So there's another category, another group of people. This group, when they come out of the grave, they're going to be herded together to the place of assembly, but they're not going to have any camels to ride on. Okay? These people are going to have to walk, and they're going to be butt naked, and they're not even going to have shoes. They're going to be barefoot and naked and forced to walk to the place of the assembly. This group, these people are what? The sinful Muslims. The Muslims who did enormous sins in this life, and they did not repent from them before death. These are the ones, they will go to the assembly walking barefoot and naked. May Allah protect us from such a fate. Ameen. And then there's a third group. It says, and the division will be herded and dragged on their faces, and they are the disbelievers. So there's yet a third category that people may fall in at this time. Some of the people, when they come out of the grave, okay, they're going to have to be dragged by the angels to the place of assembly. They're going to be dragged on their faces. So it's not even their feet that's going to, cover the distance to the place of the assembly. They're going to get dragged on their faces. Their faces are going to be all scratched up. These people are going to be naked and hungry. MashaAllah. This is obviously a terrible fate, and it's a sign of something worse that's going to come for them. This is why I strongly advise everyone and myself to make sure we make dua every single day for Allah to make us die as Muslims. Okay, because the worst thing that can happen to a human being is to die as a kafir. Because when the kafir dies, he'll never know any mercy after that. MashaAllah. And we should also know that one of the blessings that Allah Ta'ala gave the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that he blessed the ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that the majority of the people who make it into paradise are from this ummah, the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's mentioned that the people of paradise will be arranged into 120 rows, and 80 of those rows are the nation of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So 2/3 of the people in paradise are from this nation. And this is a blessing that Allah Ta'ala gave to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also among the blessings that Allah gave to the nation of Prophet Muhammad is that no other nation will enter the paradise before the nation of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so of course the first person to enter the paradise will be Prophet Muhammad himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the other prophets will enter after him. Okay, but once all of the prophets have gone in, and the time comes for the various nations to go in, it's the nation of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that goes in first. There's a question about whether Lady Aisha radiallahu anha asked about everyone being naked on the Day of Judgment. She may have asked about it. I don't recall the exact hadith you're referring to, but it's not true that everyone is naked. Okay, there will be a lot of people naked, but there will be some who are not naked. Okay, Allah would never disgrace the prophets by having them naked in front of people. The prophets for sure are not going to be naked. The pious Muslims for sure are not going to be naked. Okay, but there will be some who are naked, including some who are Muslims, that are going to be naked on that day. So if you don't want to be among the naked ones, then in this life you need to be a person of taqwa, be a person of piety. All right, fulfill your obligations and avoid everything haram, and then inshallah you'll be one of the ones with clothes on that day. May Allah grant us that. Ameen. The next section, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, he said, al-hisab, which means the reckoning or the accounting. Okay? It says the reckoning is true. So among the beliefs of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that on the Day of Judgment, there's going to be a reckoning. Okay? The people are going to be held to account The people are going to be judged. Okay, and this is in fact why we often refer to it as the day of judgment. Okay, because it's the day when this judgment would happen. Okay, we also sometimes call it Yawmul Qiyamah, which means the day of the resurrection, because among the things that happen on that day is that the people come out of their graves, the people are resurrected. Okay, the day has multiple names, but the judgment is one of the very well-known things that will happen on that day. It says, in defining and talking about what is the reckoning, it says, it is the slave's deeds being presented to them. Okay, so the reckoning, one part of it is what we call al-ard, the presentation of the deeds. That the slave has the deeds that he did in this life presented to him without anything being left out. Okay, everything that you did is written down and recorded, and it will all be presented to you. Every word you said, every step you took, every movement of your hand, it's all going to be written down and it's going to be presented to you. Okay, and you're going to be held to account for all of the things that you did while accountable. It says, and it would also be by Allah speaking to the slaves in their entirety. What does that mean? It means that the presentation of the deeds isn't only by angels showing you your books that have written in them the things that you've done. The presentation of the deeds also takes place by Allah speaking with his eternal speech. Okay, if you recall earlier in the book, we talked about this. We said that Allah is attributed with kalam, and the kalam of Allah has no similarity to the kalam of anything else. So the speech of Allah is not a sound, it's not a letter, it's not a language, it doesn't have grammar, it doesn't come in spurts. Okay, it's not the case that Allah is speaking at times and silent at times. No, this is how human language works. This is how created language works. This is how created speech works. Okay, but the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a speech that has no similarity to any other speech. Okay, the speech of Allah is eternal. It has no beginning. It has no end. It doesn't change. It doesn't come and go. It's not subject to time. Nonetheless, even though this speech has no similarity to any other speech, if Allah gives one the ability to hear it, then a person will be able to hear it, even though it's not a sound. A person will hear it if Allah wills for him to hear it. And this happened to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the night of Isra and Al-Mi'raj. And it happened to Prophet Musa alayhi salam as well. Okay, these are two for whom it's confirmed that they heard the eternal speech of Allah in the dunya. Well, on the day of judgment, everyone will hear the eternal speech of Allah. Every single person. That's what it means when it says here, in their entirety. It means all of the slaves, everyone who is resurrected, which means everybody. Okay, every one of the human, every one of the jinns, they're all going to be gathered to the assembly, and every single one of them will hear the speech of Allah, and they will understand from it whatever it is that Allah wills for them to understand from it. And among the things that they will understand from it is everything that they did in this life. So their deeds will be presented to them also in that way, by hearing the speech of Allah, which is unlike any other speech, a speech which is not sound, letter, or language, and they will understand from it the presentation of their deeds. It says, they will understand from the speech of Allah the questioning about what they did with the endowments that Allah gave them. So they will understand that they are being questioned about what they did with the blessings that Allah gave them. Allah gave us eyes. We're going to be questioned about how we used our eyes. Did we look at things that are permissible to look at, or did we look at things that are not permissible to look at? Allah blessed us with hands. We're going to be questioned about how we used our hands. Allah blessed us with minds. We're going to be questioned about how we used our minds. We're going to be questioned about how we used our feet and our stomachs and our private parts and our ears and every other thing in our body. We're going to be questioned about it. And the slaves on that day, they will understand when they hear the speech of Allah, everything that Allah wills for them to understand. Okay, and they will understand how they're being judged. It says the pious believer will be pleased, and the blasphemer will not be pleased, because he has not a single good deed in the afterlife. Okay, so when the deeds are presented to the person, the pious believer will be pleased. He'll be happy because he will see that he did all these good deeds. Okay, and he will see, or he will understand, that he's been judged favorably. As for the kafir, he's going to be terrified because he's going to see that he did all these bad deeds, tons and tons and tons of bad deeds, and he's not going to have any good deed to his credit, not even one. The kafirs who do what appear to be good deeds in this life, they get rewarded for those things in this life. On the day of judgment, they won't get any credit for the good deed. Okay, Allah makes the sun shine on them and the rain fall on them, and Allah gives them food to eat and air to breathe. These are rewards that they get for the apparently good things that they do in this life. But because they were not done in service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they were not done with a good intention, on the day of judgment, it's as if they don't exist. MashaAllah. It says, instead, he would be practically about to die from the despair. The kafir on that day, MashaAllah, when he sees that he has no good deeds and he has so many bad deeds, this person, he's going to feel very bad. He's going to despair because he knows he has no hope. He has no hope whatsoever. Okay, and his despair is going to be so strong that it's close to killing him. He's close to dying from it, but he won't die. Okay, because death is something that a person might think if he dies, that means he's not going to feel the pain of the torture that's coming. But Allah is not going to let him die. Allah will keep him alive. This person is never going to die. No matter what happens to him in the hereafter, this person will never die. It says it came in the authentic hadith, ما منكم من أحد إلا سيكلمه ربه يوم القيامة ليس بينه وبينه ترجمان. It means there is not one of you except that his Lord will speak to him on Judgment Day, and there will be no interpreter between them. Narrated by Ahmed and At-Tirmidhi. So this hadith was narrated by Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal and also by Imam At-Tirmidhi. And in it, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that everybody is going to hear the eternal speech of Allah on the day of judgment. Okay, there won't be any interpreter between them. There's not going to be an angel who speaks to him on behalf of Allah. There's not going to be anything like that. Everyone will hear the eternal speech of Allah and understand what Allah wills for them to understand. Okay, and actually, if you understand this, this is one of the proofs that the speech of Allah is not sounds and letters. Because people who speak with sounds and letters like we do, it takes time to say the sounds and the letters. If I'd want to say Bismillah, the B sound has to begin and end before the S sound can begin. And the S sound has to begin and end before the sound can begin. So Bismillah, these letters are coming one after the other. Each letter takes a certain amount of time. Even if a person speaks super duper duper fast, like no matter how fast a person speaks, if he's speaking with letters and sounds, every letter will take a certain amount of time, which means that recounting everything that a person did in his whole life is going to take a certain amount of time. And when you take into account that there have been billions and billions and billions of people, and you need to recount everything that each one of them did over the course of their lives, taking into account that some of the things that need to be judged on the day of judgment, some of them have lived very long lives. Iblis, the head of the devils, Iblis was created before Adam, and he's going to stay alive all the way until the end of the world. His lifespan is very, very, very long. Just recounting his own deeds, just that one person, if you call him a person, that one jinni, just saying everything that he did in his lifetime, no matter how fast you were to say it, it would take a very long time. It would take a very long time because everything they do is mentioned with nothing being left out. And I remind you, the Day of Judgment, the entirety of the Day of Judgment is only 50,000 years long. Okay, if the speech of Allah were a speech that were by sounds and letters, it would take more than 50,000 years to recount everything that everyone did. Okay, but the speech of Allah is not sounds and letters. It's not something that's bound by time. Okay, the speech of Allah is something that everyone will hear and everyone will understand from it what Allah willed for each person to understand from it. And it's not going to take time. This is why it says in the Quran, وَهُوَ أَسْرَعُ الْحَاسِبِينَ, that he is the fastest of judges. Okay, if Allah judged people with sounds and letters, he would be the slowest of judges, because this Day of Judgment would take, a very, 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 very long time. MashaAllah. Are there any questions about the reckoning? Someone asked about Musa being the first to come out of the grave. What's taught by Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that Prophet Muhammad is the first to come out of the grave. Okay, and there may be some kind of nuance about the difference between waking up versus coming out of the grave. There may be some kind of nuance there. But Musa alayhi salam, when he fainted that day, let's not go into it. What I know, what I've been taught, and what's confirmed by the scholars of Ahlus Sunnah is that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the first one to come out of the grave. As for brother or sister RM, it is not a Muslim tradition to refer to hadith by numbers. A lot of us, we live in this age of the internet, and we've picked up a lot of bad habits from the internet. When you read the books of the scholars, you never, ever see any scholar refer to a hadith by a number. Just like you never see any scholar refer to an ayah of Quran by a number. Okay, these are practices of Christians. Christians numbered the Bible and then they refer to the verses by numbers. They don't have hadith, but we borrowed from them the idea of numbering these things so that we can refer to them easily. Rather, the tradition of Muslims is to quote. Okay, if you want to refer to an ayah, you don't just say a surah number and an ayah number. You say the ayah, you recite it. Then everyone knows exactly which ayah you're referring to. Okay, because you said it. And I remind you that the ayahs of the Quran are not all numbered the same way. Okay, there are different narrations of how to number the ayahs. For example, in Surah Al-Fatiha, the ayah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In some narrations, that's the first ayah of Al-Fatiha. And in other narrations, that's the second ayah of Al-Fatiha. Okay, so referring to things by numbers, it's not actually clear. And in the case of hadith, it's even less clear because the books of hadith number the hadith very differently. This is just kind of a new thing people started doing, and there's no consistency about it. Okay, if you want to refer to a hadith, you should recite it. Okay, recite the hadith, inshallah, so that people will know what hadith you're referring to. Next, it says Al-Mizan. So the next chapter in the book, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, he said Al-Mizan, which means the balance. He says the balance is true. So among the things that Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah believes and affirms is that there is a balance. A balance is like a scale similar to the kind we know in this world, where it has a pan on one side and a pan on the other side. Okay, like two pans. If one pan is heavy, then the other pan goes up. The heavy one goes down and the lighter one goes up. If the other one is heavy, then that one goes down and the other one goes up. Like that. It's a balance. Okay, you can use this to see which side is heavier. Okay, and this is true. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. Okay, this ayah means that Allah is going to put the scales that are just on the day of judgment. On the day of judgment, Allah is going to put them there. Okay, so these scales are something that we believe. It's mentioned in the Quran and it's mentioned in the Hadith as well. It says, it is like the scale of the earthly life. It has a pole, a beam, and two pans, a pan for the good deeds and a pan for the bad deeds. The deeds will be weighed on it on Judgment Day. And in charge of it are Jibril and Mikael. What is weighed is merely the pages upon which the good and bad deeds were written. So here he's saying that what goes on this scale are the books. Okay, the pages or the books in which the good deeds were written go into one pan, and the pages in which the bad deeds were written go in the other pan. And so the author, may Allah have mercy on him, is saying it's the pages themselves that are weighed, the pages that have the deeds written on them. Okay, but actually this is not a matter of consensus. There are some scholars who said it's the books that are weighed, and there are some scholars that said that your actual deeds themselves are converted into something with form and weight, and your deeds are the things that are weighed on the scales. And there may be other sayings other than those as well. But in any event, regardless of what the reality of it is, what's important for us to know is that the deeds that we do in this life, they are divided into a set which are called good deeds and a set which is called bad deeds, and that the good deeds are going to be weighed against the bad deeds. Okay, whether it's by giving those deeds form or whether it's by putting the books on the scale. Okay, a weighing takes place. It says, anyone whose good deeds outweigh his bad deeds will be among the people of salvation. So if your pan with the good deeds is heavier than your pan with the bad deeds, that means you are successful. It means you're not going to get punished in hellfire. It means you're going to go to the paradise. You're saved. Anyone whose good deeds and bad deeds are equal, so the two pans are exactly balanced, no pan was heavier than the other pan, this person also is among the people of salvation. This person also is going to be saved. He's going to be safe on the day of judgment. He will not get put in hell. Why? Because his pan of bad deeds was not the heavier one. Okay, it was equal, which means he is which means that he is safe, mashallah. It says, however, he is lower in rank than the first level and higher than the third. Okay, so the author here, may Allah have mercy on him, he's mentioning that these people whose two pans are equal, they're perfectly balanced. The good pan was not heavier than the bad pan, but the bad pan was not heavier than the good pan. These people who are exactly equal, they're safe on the day of judgment, but their status, their rank is not the same as the ones whose pan of good deeds was heavier. Okay, it's mentioned that these people whose pans are perfectly balanced, although they are safe, although they don't go to the hellfire, they do not go immediately to paradise either. Like the first ones who go into paradise are going to be the ones whose pan of good deeds is heavier. And the people whose pans were balanced, they're going to have to wait outside of the gates of paradise for a time. Allahu alam how much time, but they're going to have to wait outside before they get in. These people are known as the people of Al-A'raf. The people of Al-A'raf. All right, they wait outside of paradise until they are let in. Okay, this does not mean that there's a third abode. Okay, some people, when they hear about the A'raf, they think, oh, that means the people on the day of judgment go to three places. Some go to paradise, some go to hell, and some go to the A'raf. No, the A'raf is not a third abode. Okay, there are only two abodes on the day of judgment. There's the paradise, which is the abode of delight, the abode of reward, and there's the hellfire, which is the abode of punishment, the abode of torture. All right, the people go to one or the other. There's no third place. All right, the Araf, rather, these are the people who are waiting to go into paradise. They're outside the gates. They're not. There's not like a third place, like a third abode. These people are bound for paradise, It's just they don't go in immediately. MashaAllah, there's a lot of commenting on this. The length of the Day of Judgment is 50,000 years. That's the entirety of the Day of Judgment. As it says in the Quran, في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. It says on a day, the length of which is 50,000 years. Okay, so the Day of Judgment is one day. It's a single day, but the length of that day is like 50,000 of our years. But the 50,000 year long Day of Judgment has many different things that happen in it. All right, the time that we're standing at the assembly and being judged, that's not the entirety of the 50,000 years. Okay, there's time spent on when the resurrection, coming out of the grave. There's time spent being gathered. There's time there when many things are happening on the Day of Judgment. Okay, but the amount of time that a person is standing there, Allah knows how long the person will be standing. But it's definitely not 60,000 years, because the Day of Judgment in its entirety is 50,000 years. So it would be 50,000 years or less. MashaAllah. As for the other hadith, Brother RM, he wrote out the hadith in English. The English translation, whoever made it, it says, the people will be assembled barefoot, naked, and uncircumcised. Okay, this doesn't say everybody. This hadith that you're mentioning, it doesn't say every single person without exception will be assembled barefoot, naked, and uncircumcised. It says the people. Okay, this is important when it comes to interpreting this deen. I mean, those of you who haven't taken a science called usul al-fiqh, maybe you're not familiar with the notion of am and khas, the idea that some things are general and some things are specific. Okay, if something is general, then among the things that it means is that it accepts exceptions. If something is a generalization, if something is a general statement, then there might be exceptions to it. Okay, if there's a hadith that says the people will be assembled barefoot, naked, and uncircumcised, then this is a general statement, and there may be exceptions to it. And as I said, it's inconceivable that Allah would disgrace his prophets, his best slaves, by having them be naked in front of the people. This is something that's inconceivable. Okay, the prophets for sure are not going to be naked on that day. And the Prophet ﷺ said in a Sahih hadith that the pious people are going to come out of the grave, clothed and riding on camels. Okay, so there are definitely exceptions. There are some people who are not going to be naked. Okay, but the majority of people will be naked, because all the kafirs are going to be naked. Okay, all of the kafirs are going to be naked, and kafirs are the majority of the humans. Okay, and even sinful Muslims will be naked if they're enormous sinners. Okay, so these two things are not in conflict, brother. Someone else said that La ilaha illallah will tip the scales. Okay, La ilaha illallah. Okay, how do I put this? Allah Ta'ala magnifies the reward of certain deeds. Okay, he magnifies some of the rewards of what we do. It's mentioned in the hadith that the believer does one good deed and gets rewarded as if it's 10. Okay, up to 700. So one deed might get rewarded 700 times. And then the Prophet said, Ila ma sha Allah, which means it can be rewarded even more than that. So the reward you get can be multiplied to be times 10, times 700, or times something even more than that. And our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave an example of a woman from one of the past nations, a woman who was said to have been a prostitute. So her sins were huge and enormous. And it's mentioned that one day on a very, very oppressively hot day, she went to the well to draw water, and she drew some water, and a very thirsty dog came to the well. And the woman, she wanted to give some water to this very thirsty dog, but she didn't have any container to put it in. So she took off her shoe, and she filled her shoe with water and gave it for the dog to drink from. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that Allah magnified the reward of that one act that she did to the point that she's going to go to paradise because of that one thing, even though she did so many terrible things in her life. That one deed, Allah magnified the reward of it to the point where she's going to paradise because of that one thing. So yes, it's true. Allah can magnify the rewards that the person gets for his good deeds. Okay, but we don't know how much magnification, how much multiplication Allah is going to give a person. Okay, Allah does not multiply every deed the same. One person might give $10 and someone else might give $10, and one of them have their reward multiplied a lot and the other one not. So yes, it is mentioned, for example, that in the future, there's going to come a time when knowledge of the religion has completely passed out of the world, where the Muslims that are left in the world, they don't even know how to make salat. They may not even know that salat is a thing. Okay, like all knowledge of the religion is basically gone. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said there's going to be a man who lived his whole life and the only good deed he did, like his pan of good deeds will have only one thing in it. And what's the one thing that's going to be in that pan? Is that he said, La ilaha illallah. Okay, but he's living at a time when almost everyone else in the world is a kafir, where the few Muslims that are left have almost no knowledge of their religion. Okay, this person had no good deed except that one. But Allah magnified the reward of that one deed to the point where he's going to paradise for that one thing. So yes, it is possible that La ilaha illallah, because Allah multiplied the reward, that one deed can cause a person to be successful on the Day of Judgment. It's true, okay? And it's definitely going to happen for some people, okay? But that doesn't mean that for us, all we need to do is just say La ilaha illallah and then carry on in the world like some kind of hedonist and just kind of believe that saying La ilaha illallah is enough. Okay, no, we are not murji'ah. We talked earlier in the book about the astray sect called the murji'ah. These are people who believed that as long as a person is a Muslim, then sin doesn't harm him. Okay, that you can do as much sin as you want and there's no chance of any punishment for you. Okay, we are not murji'ah. That's not what we believe. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ taught. Our Prophet told us that some Muslims are going to be in hell. And he told us that even some of the Sahaba were being tortured in their graves and that some of them are going to hell even. So we can't take it as like a blanket rule that saying La ilaha illallah will cause a person to be successful. Rather, what we do is we do good deeds and we do them sincerely in service to Allah. And because they were done sincerely, Allah may multiply the reward of it. Okay, and he may multiply it a lot. I ask Allah to grant us sincerity in our actions, and I ask for Allah's mercy in granting us reward. Ameen. After that, he says, anyone whose bad deeds outweigh his good deeds is under the will of Allah. If Allah willed, he will torture him. And if he willed, he will forgive him. Okay, so the sinful Muslim, the person who has good deeds and his pan of good deeds has a certain weight, but his pan of bad deeds has greater weight, this person, we say he's under the will of Allah. Okay, this person, because his pan of bad deeds is heavier, he deserves to go to hell. And if Allah wills, Allah will send him to hell. And this is what's just for him. So this person will be punished out of Allah's justice. But if Allah wills, Allah may show mercy to this person and may forgive him his sins and choose not to torture him in hellfire. Okay, so the Muslim whose pan of bad deeds is heavier, this one is under the will of Allah. Okay, and all he can do is hope for forgiveness and mercy. As for the blasphemer, his pan of bad deeds, the sentence here is kind of strange. I would recommend changing it slightly. It says, as for the blasphemer, his pan of bad deeds, I think we should say, will be the heavy one. It says, what's written here is his pan of bad deeds will be heavy and nothing more. But to make it more clear, I think we should say his pan of bad deeds will be the heavy one and no other outcome. When it says and nothing more, say and no other outcome. Okay, what it means is for the blasphemer, for the kafir, his bad deeds are going to make his pan of bad deeds very heavy. And his pan of good deeds will be empty. He's not going to have anything in his pan of good deeds. So there's no other possible outcome for the kafir. The pan of bad deeds is always going to be heavier than the pan of good deeds, because the pan of good deeds has literally nothing in it. So the only outcome for the blasphemer is that the pan of bad deeds will be heavier. Okay, it says because he will not have any good deeds in the hereafter. Why? It says because he had been fed for his good deeds in the earthly life. So the food that he received in this life, in the dunya, was reward for what good things he did in the dunya. Okay, having the sun shine on him and the rain fall on him and the pleasures of this life, this is reward from Allah to the kafir for the apparently good things that he did. As for the day of judgment, they will not get any reward. They will not get any reward because the good deeds are what? According to their intentions. These kafirs, they did not intend service to Allah when they did those deeds. And so therefore, those deeds were not rewardable. Therefore, they get no reward on the day of judgment. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I was taking questions throughout, so I don't think there are any questions here that I didn't get to, except the one about the 6 stages of the soul, which I intentionally did not answer. Yeah, there's no other questions. So in that case, let's say La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Rabbi ighfir li wa lil mu'minina wal mu'minat. Barakallahu feekum. I'll see you next week, insha'Allah ta'ala, at the normal time.
Wait for me on the other side, Sayyidi. 1 second.
Okay, no problem.